Okay, welcome everybody. This is NCSD's It's Your Call, and today's call is about Maven, lessons learned from users, and support for STD information systems. The purpose of the call is we know how important STD information systems are an essential component for all STD programs. And this is a part of a series of calls that hopefully will help you answer some questions about which systems are working well, which ones are having challenges, what's the cost for implementing systems, a number of questions. We have some great presenters today. We have somebody from CDC, and we have some presenters from Massachusetts and New York that are going to kind of describe their system. So before we get started, let me go through some housekeeping issues. First of all, everybody is in listen-only mode to start off with. At the end of the program, we hope to have some time for discussion and questions, and we'll allow you to have that. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please, please mute your phone, and you can *6 will mute your phone. If you want to send a question while we're talking, because we're probably going to handle questions at the end to make sure we get through everything, you can use the chat function on the left-hand side of the screen and send a message to either everybody in general or to a particular person. If in the remote instance where the facilitator of the call loses web or voice connection, please make sure you stay on the call and the facilitator will reconnect. Hopefully that's not going to be a problem because we have several backup people being on here. As you've probably heard, the call is being recorded, and both the recording and the slides are going to be available after the webinar. So again, if you have any questions or comments, make sure you use the chat box on the left. And so the agenda for today's call is just an overview from me that I just kind of gave you about why we're doing this call. Taylor Weinstock from the Division of STD Prevention at CDC is going to give us a little overview of and put the call in the context about STD information systems. And then we're going to hear from some of the lessons learned from Maven users in Massachusetts and New York. And followed up at the end of the call, we're going to sort of ask people to kind of explain some of our thinking about would it be helpful to have users group for the different information systems and help us gauge is there interest and need from you, and then follow up by questions and discussion. So just to get started, we're going to do a couple really quick poll questions. And so this applies to you answer the question if it doesn't. I think somebody needs to mute their phone, so please make sure you hit *6 to mute your phone. So the first question is, does your current STD information system meet your current program needs? So we know it's not perfect, but are you basically happy with your system, or the system you're using you're thinking about maybe switching? So are you happy or not? So you could mark that and then just put submit, and we can see the poll. So we'll give it about 20 more seconds. So it looks like, I'm going to close out this poll. We've got about 25 respondents. Interestingly, about 2/3 of people aren't really satisfied with the current system. So the next question is sort of to give us an idea. Again, if you're using a system, answer the question. If you're not in the program or you're using a system, probably don't answer the question. But what STD information system are you currently using? And so just pick one of those. If you're using a system and having STD MIS as a backup, I would use the other system rather than your backup system.
Question. Apparently anything with the web-based system.
Okay, remember to mute your phones, please. *6.
Problem with new system, they say yes. That's just true now for any. So, FYI, when we eventually someday get the new system.
Okay, somebody's got you need to mute our phones, please. *6. Thanks. All right, so we're going to close out this question. So it looks like almost half the people, about 10 people, are using STD MIS. about a quarter of the people, 6 people are using local custom developed systems. We have 6 Maven users. And so I think this session, even though it's on Maven, is going to be very helpful to the people that have other systems, because you're going to be able to hear some of the challenges and the opportunities that people that have used Maven are having, as well as some issues about cost and other flexibility and other things. So I think this call should be helpful no matter what system you're using. Okay, and the last poll question is, are you currently considering switching to a new STD information system in the next 1 to 2 years? Again, for people that are currently using a system. So really interesting. I think, almost 80% of people, we have 16 people or 17 so far, have said they're currently thinking of switching from their current information system. And that may be because we had 10 users that indicated they were using STD MIS, which is no longer supported. So given that, let's go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Hillary Weinstock from the Division of STD Prevention to sort of put this session in context. Hillary?
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Charlie, and thanks, everybody, for being here. As Charlie said, I'm with the Division of STD Prevention. I'm Chief of the Surveillance and Data Management Branch. Now, this first slide, again, just putting this call into perspective, I wanted to show the overall flow of surveillance data as it goes from providers and laboratories, as hopefully you can see on the far left, to state and local health departments and their information systems represented by the black ovals. Some of these data are then reported to CDC, and now I'm not just talking about STD data, but I'm talking about all notifiable disease data. They're sent to CDC through a variety of message formats. Most surveillance of data for various conditions go to C-cells at CDC, which is the Center for Surveillance, Epidemiology, and Laboratory Services. And then from there, the data are provisioned to the various CDC programs like the Division of STD Prevention. Some data, such as that for HIV surveillance, go directly to the Division of HIV/AIDS. They do not pass through C-cells. As you know, a lot is happening at each of these various levels. Meaningful use, increasing use of electronic laboratory reporting, electronic health records, development of standards for sending data are impacting the kinds of data that are available and how the data may be received. CDC is working with states on development and implementation of message mapping guides, for example, to be able to receive HL7 formatted surveillance data at C-cells and then provision it to the programs. This has been an ongoing process. CDC has, for the most part, gotten out of the business, as you know, of developing new information systems. The NEDS-based system, which is in about 22 states, but does not yet have a functioning STD module, is really the only exception. States and local jurisdictions, as you know, and why you are here, have had to develop their own, often integrated information systems to receive and transmit data. Information systems containing STD data present a unique challenge, not only because they must handle a large volume of data. STDs make up about 86% of all notifiable diseases, but they must also be able to handle surveillance data and data for case management and partner services, and that's different from that for other diseases, maybe with the possible exception of HIV. So this next slide shows what STD information system each state was using as of September of this year. I'm getting background echo. By the way, if there are mistakes here or updates, please don't hesitate to contact me sometime after the call so we have the most recent information. Various versions of STD MIS that hopefully you can see in the yellow are still being used in about 28 jurisdictions. The states in light blue are using Prism. The 18 areas in dark blue are using some sort of customized or homegrown systems. And those in purple, North Dakota, South Dakota, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Massachusetts, and New York City are using Maven. And that's the main subject of today's call. So with that, I'll stop and turn it over to the next speaker.
Okay, hi, this is Jillian Haney from Massachusetts. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I hear you great.
Okay, good. So good afternoon, everyone. So New York City, Robin and Kathleen and I are going to be doing a bit of a tag team approach to discuss how implementation went for Maven for our 2 jurisdictions. So it might be a little bit disjointed, but we'll do our best here. So I'm going to start off with talking about how we implemented Maven in Massachusetts. I'm coming from a perspective in that I don't sit within the STD division within our Bureau of Infectious Disease. I sit as the Director of the Office of Integrated Surveillance and Informatics Services. So I oversee all the surveillance activities for Massachusetts. My perspective is going to be a little bit more from a global reason as to why we selected Maven, and Kathleen is going to be talking about some STD specifics as well as Robin. So Charlie asked us to consider the slides, the questions that are listed here on this slide, and so these are the types of things that we're going to be speaking to this afternoon. So first off is, why did we choose Maven over other available information? In Massachusetts, we started this process back in 2004, in that we recognized that the various different siloed information systems for disease surveillance and case management within our Bureau were not going to be sustainable over the long run. Knew that there were various pockets of funding that would be able to support IT activities, but that each in and of themselves would not amount to much if we were going to go for program-specific funding streams. And so we determined back in 2004 that we were going to develop an integrated surveillance system that would support the full needs of the Bureau of Infectious Diseases in Massachusetts for all notifiable conditions, and make sure that it would be able to interface with our electronic laboratory reports. We're also getting started at that time. Make sure that all notifiable diseases would be able to be incorporated into that infrastructure. So we needed a system that was going to be able to have the flexibility to meet the disease-specific or program area requirements. We issued 3 RFRs, and we had response. The vendors were established surveillance systems companies, but there was this new company called Consilient, which actually didn't have any direct public health experience, but their product really met all of our functional requirements, as well as having the ability to be extremely flexible and scalable so that we could do a full integration and be able to customize our different program areas. The other thing that was very attractive to us about the Consilient product was that we would be able to do a lot of the work in-house so that we would not be dependent upon an outside vendor to do configuration for us. We were concerned about expense. As well as we wanted to be able to rapidly make changes to meet the needs on the ground as different situations arose. One of the issues for us in Massachusetts was around security. We do not have a county-based health system. We have 351 local boards of health that are actually responsible for doing the case investigations of reportable conditions except for STD and HIV. So we needed to ensure that we would be able to grant very specific role-based access based upon both jurisdiction, based on programmatic need, and we needed to have a system that was going to be highly configurable that would allow for that. The other thing that we also wanted to do was to have restrictions within specific disease events that would only be available to certain users. And so the example for that would be like for individuals who are doing case management of TB cases, needing to know about an individual's HIV status for prescribing medications and monitoring medications, but not everybody who would be involved in that case management of that case would need to have access to their HIV status. So those were some of the reasons that we really wanted to choose the Maven product. So we actually went live with the system back in 2006, and we have slowly we went with a very baseline. We took about a year, and we went with a very baseline configuration that would work for most notifiable conditions, such as vaccine-preventable diseases and zoonotic, as well as doing TB case management and perinatal hepatitis B case management. So with the exception of STD and HIV, we had most of the reportable disease conditions already configured within Maven. before we actually started doing the requirements gathering for STD MIS. Another thing that was particularly attractive for Maven with regard to STD programmatic requirements was the ability to have field level access for the DIS who would be out in the field doing their case investigations and case management, or who might actually be sitting within health centers. Maven also has extremely capable workflow and outbreak management capacity that has been demonstrated across the other programmatic areas to really enhance the ability to triage critical information and enhance and really streamline business practices. We have the ability to do a lot of analytics analysis and be able to export information out of the system, as well as being able to have canned surveillance reports and case management reports within the system. So it's highly configurable there as well. And then another requirement for us was having an integration with what we call our health information reporting portal, which receives all electronic reports of case reporting forms that are coming from electronic health records, electronic laboratory reports from all of the hospitals and clinical laboratories in Massachusetts, all come through that single portal for all notifiable diseases, and then are sent into an HL7 or put into an HL7 message and consumed by Maven. They're automatically triaged within Maven without any human intervention, and so it allows us to process, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of laboratory reports and case reports annually. So it's highly efficient. The key part of this is that when we started moving towards integration, we really wanted to make sure that we would have the programmatic, the support for the program's needs. And so we established our office here that made sure that we had epidemiologists and informaticians that would be able to support this transition. And so Kathleen Roosevelt, who's on the line, serves in that capacity within ISIS. And she's going to speak to some of the more STD-specific activities. And then lastly, the thing I wanted to mention, which I think has been a trend across the country, is the IT consolidation. And that has had a really, really serious impact on our ability to get things done on quickly, as well as having the flexibility to be sort of, in charge of our own destiny. And I'm going to speak to that a little bit later. So Robin? I think you're muted, Robin.
We may have an issue with Robin talking because if she wasn't able to be promoted, she's muted. I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to unmute everybody, and so please make sure your phone is, make sure you're *6 unless you're Robin.
The conference has been unmuted.
Hello?
Robin?
That's me.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, first I need to give some apologies because I have a lingering cold, and so I hope I won't cough too much. And I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to talk about this. Here in New York, it's slightly different from Massachusetts. Massachusetts is at the state level, and New York City is obviously local level. And one of the differences is that while, and I'll talk more about this, but STD is actually not integrated with the other Maven instances within the city. So we're sort of, we're kind of integrated, kind of siloed. In any case, why did we choose Maven? Well, STD MIS was not meeting our needs anymore. We had a huge volume and variety of electronic data. And this was very important. That is that we had very little agency IT support of STD MIS. So I was the troubleshooter for all of that, and I'm not an IT person. At the same time within our agency, it seemed that many of our surveillance programs were needing some new type of electronic system. TB was still on a mainframe, communicable disease needed outbreak management, and sort of vaccine preventable was looking for something. And our agency IT did receive some funds for building the electronic surveillance infrastructure. So it was sort of all of these things kind of happening at one time, a bit of serendipity. Next. And so with that, STD, we actually didn't really evaluate any STD-specific applications like Prisms or any of the others. And I think that this is important to understand when you're choosing your various systems. We chose to go with Maven and Consilience because we wanted to take advantage of sort of the agency-wide commitment to this product and to partner with other surveillance programs. I mean, we had no money and no support, and by sort of lumping ourselves in with everyone else, we were able to take advantage of that. So it's not that we thought that Maven was better for STD than Prism is for STD. It was just that worked for us locally. And Jillian said a bunch of these things. Customizable system, functionality to send and receive data seamlessly, the outbreak management, flexibility, and this was important, and I want to state it again, that you can modify your system without great vendor cost. And it did meet most of the needs of all of those 4 programs. The vendor had a proven track record, and as you can see, Massachusetts is one of those success stories. And we did like that the vendor seems to seek and incorporate customer feedback into future product releases.
So this is hello?
Hello?
There was a little anyway. So when we started to do our implementation for the non-STD programmatic areas, things went really quickly. We took about a year to do most of the general epi and another year for TB. And then we started small, but we were constantly doing enhancements to the system. And then all of a sudden the IT consolidation hit Massachusetts, and things started slowing down. STD took forever. As I mentioned before, we had been on a roll with the other programmatic areas in terms of the integration and implementation of Maven, and we started our requirements gathering with the STD program, and the consolidation of IT infrastructure resulted in IT resources being taken out of programmatic areas and resulted in the development of a hosting environment that all applications would be required to be managed within, and all of these new IT requirements that really did not take into consideration what was happening on the ground. They did not understand why our system was constantly evolving and why we were constantly doing enhancements to the system. They were used to supporting static applications, and so it took a lot of head-banging and arguing and education to try to get the IT infrastructure to be able to respond appropriately and to work with us to get the STD program integrated into the system. I cannot underemphasize that enough. Go back, please.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
So, that being said, when you do have an integrated infrastructure across programmatic areas, you have competing programmatic priorities. When H1N1 hit, we had to immediately stop any development work that we were doing and respond to that type of activity. More recently, when we had to respond to Ebola requests. So, depending upon what the disease du jour is, other programmatic needs can take a back seat when you are doing your development work. For STD specifically, we have done a phased approach, so we made sure that the initial build of the system was going to have all of the surveillance needs being met as well as the case management needs being met, but we also needed, there are additional enhancements, more bells and whistles that we would like to build onto the system, and that is actually going to come later. The other thing that cannot be underestimated is the amount of training that needs to go in for the STD program staff. Changing from STD MIS, very big departure, and we had to develop a lot of materials and ensure that there were in-person trainings over a period of several months to make sure that they were ready to be able to go live with the system. Likewise, when we consolidated a lot of our surveillance activities, staff within our own ISIS division had to be trained to be able to respond to and assess reports that were coming in, and so there was a lot of training for the non-STD program areas that would be responding to information that was coming through the system.
So our timeline in New York was back in 2007, even before the vendor was chosen. STD conducted sort of a business analysis, an as-is analysis of our surveillance and case management process. And that was actually really useful because it identified the strengths and the things that we needed to have in a future system, but also identified some weaknesses and some duplicative efforts. And so we were actually able to make procedural changes right there based on that that analysis. And even if you're not changing systems, it's good to sort of do that every once in a while. Based on that analysis, we developed our functional requirements document. The agency, and that was just the STD FRD. Then the agency issued the request for proposals. We chose Maven in 2008. In 2009, the contract was executed. STD specifically began doing sort of the real hardcore Maven work in April of 2009, and then in November of 2010 is when we went live.
I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that we wanted them was to try to be able to leverage different cooperative agreements and funding opportunities to be able to support a system. These big surveillance system projects, they're not cheap. We've spent quite a bit of money over the last several years in terms of maintaining it. I think everybody's been happy about it, but it is expensive. So currently, in terms of our ongoing maintenance supports, we're paying around $90,000 to Consilience, and this includes what is called Tier 3 support. So basically you get a bug into the system and they'll do an investigation and then they'll fix that bug as it relates to the core product. But anything that relates to sort of the specific customized work that's, bugs that may have been identified for our surveillance activities or case managed activities, our own IT structure has to support. We have to pay in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $700,000 a year for hosting costs. That's, as I mentioned before, internal to the state. They provide us with DBAs. They provide us with monitoring. They provide us with release management. They provide us with security testing, all of these other things. I personally believe that it's not all necessary, but I mentioned that we have to live within the constraints of IT consolidation. It is very expensive. That also does include hardware costs, and we have a pretty robust environment to support Maven implementation. We have a development environment. We have a certification environment that does contain live data where we do most of our testing. We also have then the production environment as well as a reporting server. The staff that support the system in-house include 5 developers and a project manager. Some of these individuals are contract staff, and some of them are funded through CDC cooperative agreements. We also, again, as I mentioned, have the IT staff from the hosting environment. We also have Kathleen Roosevelt, who sits within our surveillance unit, who is the informatician and epidemiologist that is responsible for making sure that the STD-specific requirements are met. Although she's with ISIS, she's actually very much embedded with the program, and she's really responsible for making sure that she understands all of the requirements that are specific to STD. And then, of course, you have indirect resources that have to be considered as well to support electronic laboratory reporting activities, and then all of the quality assurance activities that go along with that. As you start consuming more and more data electronically, you really need to shift resources into making sure that the quality of those data are coming through are systematically assessed.
So the New York City project, we had an original contract of about $3 million, and that was for 4 individual Maven licenses. Like I believe that that Massachusetts, you guys have one Maven license, and that covers all of your surveillance. And so we had four different instances. And this cost included developing our data collection model, business processing rules, workflows, reports, conversion of STD-MIS data, which was a bear, but actually was quite successful, I would have to say, and also included developing a custom NETS extract for us. I'd say that STD probably had about $60,000 in additional customization for implementation. Overall, the agency pays about $300,000 in annual maintenance costs, and again, that's for all 4 deployments. And I think that this is important to note that STD, our specific bureau, has not contributed any money to all of this pot so far. So I think that we made the right decision jumping on the coattails of everyone else who was going in the Maven direction because we've been able to leverage IT funds, and anytime there's bioterrorism money or Homeland Security money for infrastructure, they're putting it into Maven. That's not to say that there hasn't been costs. There have just been personnel costs and blood, sweat, and tears, but not actual money from the cash-strapped STD program.
Great. Hi, this is Kathleen. I am going to talk about a little bit more into the specifics of our development and implementation of the STD Maven module in Massachusetts. So we were, of course, met with some challenges as we developed the system. It is a departure from the structure of STD-MIS, and the look and feel is very different. There are also some issues that we ran into with the way that the system is structured, and I think the biggest one of these for us was the way that we dealt with what's called the event time period for syphilis. So all of the diseases in Maven must have a time period associated with them for deduplication purposes, and so we struggled with that for syphilis because, as everyone knows, the syphilis doesn't really adhere to a time period. It really goes off of tighter values. So that was something that is still presenting a challenge, but we're working through it, and we're having each laboratory obviously reviewed once it enters the system. So the other big thing was transitioning from more of a record-based system to a person and event-based system. So with a field record that existed in STD-MIS, now we have actually a field record that exists within an event for a patient with syphilis, and that transition was sort of difficult for some people to wrap their head around. As Jillian mentioned before, consolidated IT was, presented a pretty significant barrier to us, but I really just don't think that this could be overstated. We had an infrastructure that was far removed from what we do in public health, and asked lots of questions, ranging from requiring us to justify our needs for even specific STD reports, and then more broadly to changing their requirements for what was needed for deployment, and having significant staff turnover, which presented issues. Finally, this was sort of a challenge, but I'm glad we did it, is that we really worked on standardization of terms and data for the STD division. So we brought them into our integrated system, and that meant bringing them into using a lot of the terms that we use across the Bureau, which was good for us.
Yeah, New York City had a lot of challenges with this, and I'd say one of the biggest ones is that we were the first local health department to use Maven, and as in not at the state level, but at the local level. And New York City is just an odd bird to begin with. And Consilience incredibly underestimated the scope of the project. They overestimated their timelines and the resources required, and so we were all constantly sort of struggling with each other how to do that. And additionally, New York City was the first customer to incorporate STD case management as well as surveillance into Maven, and that was really, really challenging because part of the strength of Maven is its flexibility, but then that meant that we had to essentially, create a wheel that no one else had really done. And frankly, I'm really hoping that someone out there can, do a better job than what we did, because, we did what we could, but it's not the most elegant. Additionally, Maven functionality, as Kathleen said, was a substantial departure from STD-MIS, and it can't emphasize enough the amount of training and continuous QA was needed. And this challenge is a really important one, the last one, and one that folks really need to think about, whether they're going to Maven or any other program, is that your system administrators have to be highly skilled to take advantage of the ability to update Maven and to use all of its functionality. The staff you need today, which are high-level, informaticians and folks with some programming skills, to handle electronic data is a lot different than having a cadre of folks who are simply data entering, your lab reports. And so that's been, it's still an ongoing challenge, not just of implementation, but today it remains a challenge.
So I think for us what went smoothly during the development and implementation process, I should actually mention here that we didn't use Consilience to do a lot of the development. We used them for development of our NETS extract, but most of the work on the question packages and our reports and custom workflows that we built were done by our in-house IT staff and directed by a group that we formed of DIS, epidemiologists, and informaticians who met regularly during the development stage and who we demoed the system for as development was ongoing. And I think that this really helped so that there weren't many surprises when we actually did go live and we started training. And we did extensive testing to minimize bugs, and we actually also had in place this integrated surveillance group, which Jillian leads, which is called ISIS, and where I sit also. And because we had that, we already had a group who was familiar with the system administration and familiar with how the system worked, and it is the single point of contact for reporters, for clinicians, and laboratorians to report to. So we sort of had this in place already, which I think really helped make the implementation process go smoothly.
So when Charlie first posed these questions, I was actually tempted to leave this slide blank because I don't feel like anything went smoothly during the New York City implementation. But then when I saw what Massachusetts had written, I was like, well, you know what, we actually did have some good things. And one of the things that we did do is we formed an internal Maven users group, and we call ourselves the Muggers. Very early in development, before even the contract with Consilience was executed. And so it included all 4 of the disease programs that would be using Maven and our agency IT. And we still meet monthly to ask questions, to showcase interesting things that we've done with our Mavens. We also discuss ongoing issues, feature requests, et cetera. It's also a good forum actually for surveillance related, although maybe not specifically Maven. discussions. And our user group now includes 2 mental hygiene programs that are part of the health department that have used Maven for different kinds of uses, not just disease surveillance.
Great. So I think that many positive things have come out of our implementation. Now, we have only started using Maven for STD in Massachusetts since July of this year. So we're still relatively new using the system. But we have standardized our surveillance activities across the Bureau. Now we have all of the reportable diseases in Massachusetts that reported to an integrated system, except for HIV. HIV is not fully rolled into the system right now. We have DIS capability to access the system from the field, and we have outposted DIS in Massachusetts. So that has been incredibly helpful to them. We have increased capability for looking at co-infections and increased integration with ELR, and in Massachusetts we're receiving over 90% of our laboratory reports via ELR. And we've created customized surveillance and case management reports that were driven by the program, so those are of great use, and we've actually made updates to those even since July. There were a couple that we realized after implementation could be tweaked a little, and we've already started to tweak those. And we have embedded GIS capability in Maven. And then finally, I know both Jillian and Robin mentioned economies of scale, but I think that this can't be overstated because, you know, we can all piecemeal monies together, but they don't do very much on their own. And if we actually can combine them, which we've been able to do, we can really maintain and create a sustainable system. And that's, I think, one of the most important things that have come out of the implementation of Maven for STD.
So in New York, the positive developments is, I think that we had improved collaboration and communication within our own agency, which we hadn't had before. It was an opportunity to critically review and improve our program, and I actually enjoyed working with the Consilience staff on the ground very much. So I would say that that's positive. So lessons learned and best practices. Document. I can't tell you how many times we would go into a meeting, and this is with 4 disease programs, IT, Consilience, make decisions, come out of that meeting and go, what did we decide? How are we going to do this? And then we'd have to go back and rethink it, and it was excruciating. Priorities of stakeholders are not always in sync. Ultimately, Consilience is a for-profit company, and they want to make money, and that they're allowed to do that. But that's not sort of the same, goals that public health has. Collaboration can be really, really, really hard, and I think that Massachusetts, when they talk about their consolidated IT and their ability to collaborate, that was a difficult piece. Beware of those who overpromise. Increased dependency on technology and agency IT can really be a double-edged sword. If something goes down, if one little piece of that incredible network of all the different cogs, it really can affect you downstream, and someone needs to be paying attention to those at all times. I mentioned this earlier, but you really need to consider the new skills that your staff is going to need to develop. I would say that upfront investment of resources greatly increases the chance of success. And this one was really hard for me and many of the folks here in New York. and that is, anticipating that you're going to make many critical mistakes, and that something and someone is going to fail. I mean, I think like software developers, they're always in the mindset of there's going to be bugs, and so we push out a new product, and that is sort of the normal way, and that's not sort of how we all thought about it and we're approaching it. And one of the mantras that we used during the program, the development, was perfect is the enemy of the good, and that we really needed to sort of not strive to make everything perfect when you start out with, because there's going to be mistakes. And then they asked us about the amount of staff that were needed. So during our implementation for STD, the surveillance coordinator, which was me, I mean, I probably was spending more than 75% of my time, but that's a conservative estimate. Partner services director spent a lot of time. We had some research scientists, basically epidemiologists, and our programmer. And then our agency IT gave us 75% of a person. They gave us a whole person. 75% of their time was used for implementation. And then moving forward, there's someone, a project manager, who who keeps all of our 4 programs going.
Hi, this is Charlie. Just so we only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure we have time at the end for discussion. If each of you can both just sort of finish up and say, real briefly, what are your recommendations to other project areas, and I'm going to turn it over to Hillary for a minute. So if we could just have to skip some slides, and slides are going to be available to people, but maybe let's just finish up at the last slide about your final recommendations.
Sure. So this is Kathleen from Massachusetts, and I would say that including end-user staff and development was a big one for us, and training was key. And we're still new using the system. It's just like I said, since July, so we're doing ongoing training even this week and into next month. So those were the big ones for us.
The other thing, this is Jillian. The other thing I would add to that is that there's a lot of cross-program functionality that can be shared. And I think that a lot of the programs tend to think that that they're very highly specialized and that they do things in their own unique way. And there's a lot more that the program areas actually have in common than they actually do differently. And so it's a real opportunity to share resources and to get that economies of scale going as well.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. We did learn a lot more about how much we do similar work and could leverage information off of each other. For New York, the biggest recommendation I would have for anyone implementing is to really consider developing and implementing in stages, and include those details in a contract if you're working with a vendor, because you really need an opportunity to learn and QA your system with real life data and real life users. I can tell you that we spent so much time developing reports before we went live, and those reports are now useless because we really didn't have a full grasp of how our data were going to look while we were collecting them and how the users were going to use them. They were written correctly based on our specs, but our specs were not informed fully. So I would definitely implement in stages. And that helps you improve your future stages. And this is also really important, is that after you go live, you're not a priority to anyone anymore. So if you work it into a contract where after go live, still you have all these deliverables, you stay a priority to someone. And an important recommendation or something to keep in mind is that post-implementation, at least for New York, was the hardest phase. Those 3 months after we went live they were brutal in discovering all of your problems, trying to fix them, and going back and really trying to make something happen.
So I really want to thank our speakers from New York City and Massachusetts. They really gave us some real-world experience. I'm going to turn it over briefly to Hillary to talk about where do we go from here, what kind of support can CDC and NCSD provide the grantees, and then have a quick question, and then we'll open up the last remaining couple minutes for questions and discussion. If you have any questions for Kathleen or Robin, here's their information. Again, we're going to make the slides available after the talk. So, Hillard, if you want to briefly talk about.
Sure. And thank you very much to all the speakers. This has really been great. And clearly there's not enough time to hear everything I think we'd all like to hear and ask questions and discuss. But that's part of the rationale, I think, behind some of the STD systems users groups that we've been discussing. We've heard from a number of areas that this would be helpful to them. And in fact, we've been working, Charlie and I have been working with some of the Prism users who are developing a users group in collaboration with NCSD and CDC. We were wondering whether that might also be helpful for the Maven users or potential Maven users. We realize there is a Consilience led Maven users group, but we thought one that was more specific to STD that just focused on the issues surrounding STD information systems that may be unique because they involve partner services data and case management data. That would give us an opportunity to share experiences and challenges and also learn how we can help each other. Clearly, CDC is not the expert here. You all are, who have used it and benefited and learned some of the ins and outs of these systems that could benefit your colleagues, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again, and we might be able to leverage some of the costs and some of the efficiencies with Consilience or whatever other companies that are working with these systems. So we did want to get your feedback either now or later about the value of a potential Maven users group that could meet, and we could, obviously we could adjust the frequency of any such meetings depending on the need, but we wanted to hear from you about the usefulness of that.
So I'm going to open up a poll question. No matter what system you're using, what a system-specific user group, whether it's Maven, Prism, for the people that are going to use NDS, custom systems, would a user group be helpful? And I think what CDC and NCSD are talking about is if we have enough support from people, we obviously know that there's logistical issues about having users groups, and that I think NCSD in partnering with CDC can help with some of the logistics as far as organizing the meeting, getting the call lines, taking notes, encouraging people to participate. So if you could quickly answer this question, and we'll see what kind of interest there is. And we'll also, this won't be the only way we'll garner interest, but we really think that users groups are going to be great, not only to share information among the different users and people are in different places, but I think also it's sort of providing some leverage when dealing with some of these companies that 4 or 5 people need to develop, the same kind of module. Maybe some of the costs can be shared. We understand that there's customization and individualization, but maybe if some of the costs can be shared, we can reduce the costs for everybody overall. So looking so far, we have 22 people saying yes and nobody saying no. So I think we're hearing a good signal from everybody to move forward with users groups. So I want to take the remaining 5 or 10 minutes because we do want to end around 1. I think, in the notice we had 1:15, and that was primarily just to give us some time so that the call wouldn't be cut off, but we generally try to keep these calls open for about an hour. Please, either, since your phones are unmuted, if you have a question, I think it's *7 or unmute your phone, identify yourself and ask who you want to ask the question to, and we'll leave the last 5 minutes open for questions or comments. So any questions or comments, or again, feel free to use the chat function. Although at this point, I think, feel free to, again, since the phones are unmuted, to ask a question.
The conference has been unmuted.
Questions, anybody?
This is Jennifer in Virginia. I had a question for I believe it's Kathleen, Massachusetts, in how they're handling co-infection, especially in regards to like interview records or field records and such. They have a good system.
Yeah. So, hi. We have actually created a copy over functionality between linked events in Maven. So I know that we do it actually much differently than New York does, but we enter the information into an event, and then we actually have a disease event hierarchy, and we link from the higher disease in the hierarchy. So if it would be syphilis and gonorrhea, we'd link from syphilis to the gonorrhea event, and then information from the syphilis event that is also relevant to the gonorrhea event copies down into the other event, but it copies over the link.
So this is Jillian. The other thing to say is that Maven is an event-based system, and so you can look at co-infection across specific disease events and have that show up in your dashboard. So for the STDs are all linked in that way, as are the viral hepatitis and various other diseases. So while you won't see co-infection be necessarily like syphilis and TB, you can see an individual syphilis event and any other corresponding STD events and be able to toggle back and forth between those events very easily. So it's both a ability to toggle back and forth between events as well as copy down to specific disease events.
Yeah, but if you're talking about sort of like field records and things like that,
right,
so we use the field record in the syphilis event, and it shows the linked co-infections. So basically we have what's called a print document that's affiliated with the syphilis event because that's sort of higher up on the hierarchy. And since we have that copy over functionality with the link, we have the linked event that pulls in and shows up on that field record. And if there's anything else like notes that are in both events, they'll both copy into that field record over that link as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a chat question to both New York City and Massachusetts. Are the modifications made by New York City and Massachusetts considered open source to other health departments, or does Consilience have priority rights to your modules? And that's for health departments that have purchased Maven.
So this is Jillian. I think that's a little bit of both. So it's my understanding that anytime you have public funds that are used to develop capacity, or anytime public funds are spent, that they can't double dip, and so you can't charge for the same activity and for other public funds. And so we have been able to share code across jurisdictions that are using Maven, because there are a lot of other sites that are doing that. We shared with North Carolina, for example, quite a bit. But I think that sometimes the specialized configuration that is required in these instances allows Consilience to charge for what could also be considered common functionality. Robin, do you have thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's like Maven, the product itself has, the core product is not open source. But the functionality to be able to do custom things, that is the stuff that I feel like we share with each other and can share across jurisdictions. But so yeah, combination is probably a good way to describe it.
Okay, we have another question, and this is probably for both of you. Will Maven be able to integrate syphilis and HIV? And if so, will all the information be copied to the others so you won't have to retype information?
So Maven, folks, Maven can do anything you teach it or tell it to do. So the answer is yes. The questions are how are you going to use the functionality that Maven has to make that work for you? And that's what I was trying to get at, whereas it was a complete blank screen and like blank canvas, and we could do sort of any way you wanted it to do. Like when you get STDMIS, things are very sort of set up, and you have to do the workflows and all of the various things the way it's already set for you. Sort of both the strength and one of the pain points of Maven is its flexibility. It's open, and within its functions, you can do whatever you want, but you just got to figure out how to make that happen. It's not set up for you.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll leave it open for a minute or two. Any comments?
Hi, this is Marcy Babcock from Minnesota, and I'm wondering if either of you are using the system for syphilis visual case analysis.
No.
No, we haven't done that yet. We've looked into it a little bit in Massachusetts, and we've talked to Consilience about it briefly, but we haven't designated the funds yet to develop a report with them or something with them. I think New Mexico is doing that, though, with Prism.
Hey, other questions? Well, I really want to thank all our speakers. We had great presentations. We've had a number of comments in the chat, commenting about the great quality of the presenters. We generally try to limit these to about an hour when everybody's busy, and some people have to do these on their lunch hour. And so, if people want to hear more about these things, we're going to have an evaluation. Right when you close out, there'll be a quick evaluation, and then we'll send out one in the next day or so, a little bit more detailed. And if you have ideas about other presentations you want to do for It's Your Call, which again is sort of focused on information that programs want that's going to be helpful to them, whether it's discussion issues. We do have a call scheduled currently for January 15th on congenital syphilis, and we're going to be talking about some of the areas where it's increasing and maybe some of the best practices in either preventing congenital syphilis or responding to outbreaks. So, stay tuned. We'll be sending out some details to that. And again, we're going to make this, both the recording and the presentation slides will be available after the webinar. We apologize for having to cut short a few of the slides, but they are going to be available. And when you look those slides over, if you have any questions, feel free to contact either the speakers or email. Our email addresses are available on your cover slides or the final slide, so you'll be able to do that. So without hearing one more chance for any questions, I really want to thank all the speakers. Great job, and have safe holidays, and we'll talk to you in January about congenital syphilis. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.